Well, good morning. On behalf of our Board of Trustees, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the State of the University address here on the campus of East Tennessee State University. I want to begin by thanking our board for your service to the institution. Thank you for the leadership, the vision, but the calm direction that you helped to provide so that we as a university are able to chart a course that's a little bit different than the course that you see across all of American higher education. I also want to take a moment to thank Dr. Mike Hoff, Dr. Joe Chappell, Jess Fodden, and Adam Green for their assistance in putting together what is 82 slides. We were almost at 100, but I promise you we've reduced the number. And to Donna, thank you for your willingness to go along on this journey with me for more than a decade. This is a magical time on the campus of East Tennessee State University, and I have the honor today to tell the story of an institution on the move. My presentation will be focused within the following areas, and the presentation is grounded within the founding mission of the university. Today is October 10th. On this date in 1911, this gentleman, our first president, Sidney Gilbreth, provided the mission for the university, a mission that you're familiar with to improve the quality of life for the people of the region. But he also talked about the important roles of teaching, of scholarship, and the critical role that our faculty play as the heart of the institution, and the role that the faculty play in keeping the values of the university front and center. Those values that were established in 1911 remain constant to today, and we're honored to be a part of an institution that has shepherded a mission in ways that few have across our nation. That mission presently is grounded in the work of the Committee for 125, Chapter 2, Strategic Planning Framework. You're familiar with these pillars, but these pillars undergird the momentum that I have the opportunity to spotlight in the slides that follow. But I want to start by talking a little bit about the landscape of higher education in our nation. What are the issues facing higher education? You see here, as noted by the Association in Governing Boards and Inside Higher Education, some of the elements that the Academy is facing: political pressure, an uncertain judicial landscape, changes in post-secondary education's intercollegiate athletic element as a result of changes in the House settlement, the demographic cliff, etc. These issues are not foreign to us because each year we pay attention to emerging trends and we adjust accordingly. And one of the trends that we've paid attention to for the better part of a decade is the demographic cliff. In fact, many years ago, I stood before you at the Culp Center and talked about the challenges presented by the demographic cliff, declining numbers of high school graduates, and how we had to adjust our marketing and enrollment strategy accordingly. Then the state created the Promise program. That was a demographic cliff pretty quickly for us. But we've been ahead of this, but I draw your attention to the differences in states. We're fortunate that these numbers look different in the state of Tennessee. In fact, we do not see a cliff in Tennessee. We see a growth of more than 10,000 high school graduates over the course of the planning session. But those states around us, Kentucky, Illinois, even states far, such as California, are looking to us as a recruiting ground. So we have to remain vigilant in our efforts, not only to tell the story, but to ensure that we're providing a solid return on the investment for students who come to this institution. But another area that we've put front and center is our college-going rates. Our college-going rates have rebounded, but they still are not where they were pre-COVID. And they're still not where they were at the height in that 63 percentage point right after the implementation of Promise. So work to be done there. But specific work to be done in our region. In Johnson County, for example, the college-going rate is less than 40%. But once again, look at the difference by gender. Less than 50% of males across the state are moving on to post-secondary education. So if you're in Johnson County or Carter County or Hamlin County or Hancock County, where the numbers overall are less than 50, those numbers for men are in the 30s. This is why P20 is so important for us, and that mission that President Gilbreth established to put educators in rural communities as front and center. And as we move through this morning's presentation, I'll affirm that mission time and time again. But that gender difference just doesn't show up in college-going rates. It shows up in aspirations. Men have a different set of aspirations for their future than women, with more women declaring that they intend to move on and receive a degree. But these are no longer rates and aspirations. They're showing up in real numbers. For the population aged 25 to 34, in 1994, when the band Rush was on tour, and they're on tour again for those who are unaware, 25% of men and 25% of women had a college degree. Now, there's a 10% gap. The socioeconomic consequences of this will play through our nation for decades, which is why we as educators need to be aware of this material and plan accordingly. And this is surprising to me because the return on a degree hasn't changed. The best investment an individual can make in their future, or the best investment a family can make in their child's future, is an investment in education. Because as educational attainment improves, so does earning potential throughout their lifetime. But the public benefits of higher education remain unchanged as well. Innovation, advance, inquiry, discovery, job and career growth. These elements are front and center in terms of the value proposition. And as I get older, this one's important to me because as educational attainment increases, so does life expectancy. But one of the things that has changed is the manner in which Americans view higher education and the level of confidence that they have in the academy. According to a recent poll by Professor John Greer at Vanderbilt University, you see that confidence in higher education has rebounded and increased a little bit. And if you look at that slide, you think, well, there's a pretty precipitous dip there. But now let's look at it this way. Americans who have a great degree of confidence in higher education, that's 47% overall. So they still see us as an avenue to the middle class and a key to the American dream. But one thing that has changed is they want us to stay out of politics. They want us to stay focused on our mission, focused on what happens in the classroom, but not to be in a position where we're engaged in political debates. This is what America is saying they want from our post-secondary system. And when I was digging into this data, this to me was really surprising because for the bulk of my career in education, one of the foremost concerns that the nation had about higher education was cost. That's not the predominant concern anymore. It's political bias. So how does we as an Academy of Scholars take this information, digest this information, and move forward? I don't have the answers to that question, but that's a question that needs to be in front of all of us as we move through the academic year to come. Now, when you set all that to the side, what do parents want for their kids? They want them to go to college. 2-year, 4-year, public-private, a certificate, a doctoral degree from ETSU. Parents want their children to go to college. Why? Because of what it does. It equips them with skills. It provides them with the opportunity to think critically, to work in teams, to become better informed citizens. What our nation wants from the academy hasn't changed. Its importance hasn't changed, and our mission hasn't changed. But one thing that has changed is the financial landscape of the academy. Fitch talks about the uncertainty in the environment and uncertainty driven by changes at the federal level, changes in the grant landscape, but that uncertainty is felt critically in the private sector. Now, you may look at this chart and say, well, Brian, you've got lesser numbers in the most recent year than in the year prior. But part of that is driven by the lack of private institutions that existed then than exist now, because all across the country, small private institutions are closing their doors. But it's not just private institutions facing challenges, there are public sector institutions as well. So that's the landscape that we're operating in. We need to be cognizant of that landscape, but recognize that is not the position we're in at our university, and we're where we are because of the leadership of the individuals in this room. A number of years ago, I did a series called Did You Know? And we tried to dispel some myths about East Tennessee State University. This is a myth that I'd like to dispel about higher education as a whole, because the myth is that college is more expensive than it used to be, and college isn't possible. When you look at tuition and fees are actually lower now when you adjust for inflation than they were a decade ago. In the state of Tennessee, that bundle of cost has changed little at all. And when you unpack that bundle of cost and look at where investments go, you see what happens on the tuition side, but that housing and other costs, those are costs that individuals will incur whether they go on to college or not. But one of the things that happens when you go to college is you become eligible for financial aid. 97% of all Tennesseans who attend a public university in this state receive some form of financial aid. And look at the total packet of out-of-pocket costs, $10,000. So when you take that aid, be it Pell, be it the lottery scholarship, or be it our academic performance scholarships, all in the out-of-pocket cost is $10,000. Room, board, books, fees, tuition. So college remains possible and affordable, but as we plan, we've got to continue to be wise stewards of our resources. The board is pushing on affordability, and for multiple years, our tuition increases sat in single digits. That's the reason we're in this position as a state. But there's an element of financial aid that doesn't get talked about a lot. We saw this last year front and center during Hurricane Helene, as individuals from around the region, and in fact, many board members contributed to our Student Crisis Fund. And as I was doing research for today's address, one of the things that really jumped out at me is recent research from Inside Higher Education that demonstrates that the smallest impediment can cause a student to step away. So be it a challenge with a vehicle, a tire, a challenge you're facing at home, sometimes $100 is the difference between staying in college or dropping out. So while there are massive investments on the aid side, life often gets in the way. So I've got a little link here for those of you who are interested in contributing to this element, but our crisis fund, led by Dr. Michelle Bird, who is an outstanding leader on this campus, makes a difference daily, and we saw that difference magnified last year by the impacts of Helene. So let's step up and talk a little bit about East Tennessee State University from a finance perspective. We've got about a $400 million budget all in, a little bit more than 40 cents on the dollar generated by tuition and fees, a little bit more than 40 cents on the dollar generated by state appropriations. The bulk of our money is invested in our people. We've grown reserves over time. We'll go to the board in November with our financial plan for the year. We will once again invest reserves. In about a week, Christy Graham and her team will provide the fallout charts to the colleges and budget units. We're going to push back more than $8 million in fallout resources to the units. But the fallout that accrues to Central, which is right about $1.6 million, we're going to put every penny of that in reserves to plan, to build our rainy day fund in the event that something were to transpire, and with the uncertainty, as Dr. Hagemeyer is well aware, at the federal level with grants and contracts and sponsored activity, we need that cushion in the event that something moves. You can't see this chart, but you got to trust me. Why are we in the position we're in? Prudent leadership from the board, outstanding financial leadership from the deans. But the investment that the state of Tennessee has made in our institution from COVID to now is $30 million in new state resources. That's not the case in most states in the union. The state of Tennessee is investing in our institutions, both in capital as well as in operating. And here's how those investments play out. Here's where our resources go, the bulk of it to instruction. And then once again, the bulk of that goes to people. 76 cents on the dollar of what we spend as an institution, we spend on our people. So how are we approaching budget planning for the year? Many of you in the room were involved in the development of our revised budget model. We have a decentralized budget structure on this campus. The deans provide outstanding leadership for their colleges. And we want to ensure that that incentivized system that we created more than a decade ago remains in place. So the budget model, under the leadership of Christy Graham and an outstanding committee led by James Harlan, made some adjustments to that structure. And here's that revised budget process. But as a result of running that revised budget process for the year, the credit hour growth that has occurred in arts and sciences and business and technology and public health was rewarded through the model. So $1 million is added to the base budgets cumulatively across those three colleges. And we'll run that model throughout the cycle, making some adjustments. But we incentivize growth, we incentivize retention. The state does it on the state formula side, and we do it on the campus side with the new model that we've put in place. We talked about this at length last year. We developed a new class and comp system for the university, moving away from an antiquated structure that has existed since we were a Board of Regents institution, providing greater flexibility to unit heads to recognize performance for their staff. Now, these numbers are new and old at the same time. This is the most recent data available on faculty salaries in comparison to peers, but it's for 23-24. It doesn't show the investments we made last year, but we're making progress. We're making progress. We're also making progress on the staff side, but the gap to peer is different for faculty and staff. So as we look at those market adjustments coming forward in 26, we've got to look at the methodology, but ensure that we're making progress towards the goal that the board has set for us to be at the average of our peer institutions. We're going to take to the board in a couple of weeks a 2.3% across the board salary enhancement with a $7,500 ceiling. That pushes resources down towards the middle. There's not a floor because last year we reset the floor. Every staff member was brought to the entry point of the market salary range. And then in the 26 calendar year, we will come back with another round of market adjustments. So just like we did last year, we'll sit down with faculty and staff, we'll approach this in a shared governance perspective, but we will continue to invest in this because this is where resources are going. This is why vacancy management matters. This is why the wise structure that we've put in place through the model matters, because we're freeing up resources to invest them back in our people. And some of that is reflected in the following. I'm pleased to announce that for the second year in a row, we've been recognized as a great college to work for, but for the first time ever, we're on the honor roll, which means we're in the top 50 institutions in the nation in terms of the culture that we've established for this university. And this isn't something I've done, it's something we've done together. Look at the numbers for commitment to mission and institutional pride. Look at the numbers around shared governance and collaboration. We're far exceeding what you see in the Carnegie peers, and this is because of you. So it is an honor to work at an institution where we strive together to solve challenges that face not only us but the region as a whole, and you're seeing that play out in the way that the Great Colleges to Work For survey reflects of the institution. One of the top 50 universities in the country to work for. So now let's shift a little bit. I love this picture. I hope we're this happy on Saturday at the end of the VMI game. Fourth quarter's been something to forget here in Johnson City, but I anticipate that's going to change on Saturday. A little bit on enrollment. This is last year's data. So you see the state beginning to rebound from the COVID decline. Here was enrollment at an institutional level last year. One of the things that's always fascinating and important to remind us of is that as a state, most of the institutions are full-time, not that many part-time. There are students coming here for destination experiences. In our institution, about 80% of the enrollment at this university is full-time. But that 60 number to the right, I hope that sinks in. 60% of the students who are your undergraduate classrooms are Pell eligible. 60%. 40% are first generation. So we're sitting here more than 100 years after President Gilbert gave us our charge. But our mission really remains the same because our students are first generation and low income. That's why those crisis funds matter so much, because for a Pell eligible student, the smallest impediment is the difference between graduating and not. So here's enrollment for this year. We have the second largest freshman class of any institution in what was the Board of Regents. We have more freshmen than the University of Memphis. But as you look across the state, you see that that growth isn't constant at all institutions. Here's enrollment at the university, 14,300. That number would have been larger if it weren't for some things that impact international students, and I'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. But growth across all sectors. I want to thank Dr. Debbie Bird for her leadership at Gatton. The work that has happened at the Gatton College of Pharmacy to rebound, to rebuild, is extraordinary, and next year we'll be right back where we were at our peak in the last decade. But across the board, from increasing the size of the incoming class in the Quillen College of Medicine to work that you're doing across the board, this just isn't one part of the university, it's the entire university locking arms on our enrollment mission. And here's that broken out a little bit more. Look at that freshman class, 2283, the largest in the history of the university. And I want to thank Jess Vaught and her team for the work that they've done to help us tell the story. I want to thank Heather Levesque and her staff for the work that they do on a daily basis to get out and talk about this institution. Yesterday, I had the honor to be in Hendersonville, North Carolina with some of Dr. Levesque's staff, talking to students in Western North Carolina about our university. But who helped make that school run? Our alum. Because faculty member in the art department, our alum. Superintendent of schools, has a daughter at this institution. One of the lead counselors has a daughter who's going to graduate from nursing in December, already has a job in Asheville working in the cardiology unit. So our mission extends beyond both the counties and the region here. Our mission extends across the country. So here you see where that number comes from, but look at the Tennessee numbers. More than a 300 student increase in Tennesseans. But let's talk a little about international students. This is something that we saw coming as we moved through the calendar year. Institutions across the country began to anticipate enrollment declines. Most felt that those enrollment declines would be manageable, but as we moved into the fall, as we looked at international student arrivals in our nation in August, more than 70,000 fewer international students entered this country this year than last. And I draw your attention to the continent of Africa because we have for so long recruited outstanding students to our institution from there. So as we look forward, we've got to recognize that numbers are changing, but I hope this doesn't change. These are 3 international students who live the mission of the university. Wambui is a graduate student, does outstanding work with the graduate school, is a member of the Andrews Leadership Academy. Many of you know Sam, active in the SGA. He worked the welcome booth in the Culp, and he's omnipresent with marketing and communication, serving as a videographer for the region. And then you've met Yarrow, who has raised millions of dollars for citizens of his home country who have been impacted by the war. So these are more than numbers, they are people. People who embody the mission of the university, who make us a better place, and as you see with Yarrow, make us better as citizens. So a little bit on success. Pleased to announce that our retention rates have rebounded. We're pretty close to once again breaking the record. Here's retention rates started at ETSU, return anywhere. That number is approaching 80%. As a reminder, the 125 goal is 85%. Here's graduation rates. The highest graduation rate in the history of the university, started ETSU, graduate from ETSU. The highest graduation rate in the history of the university. But then if we use the THEC numbers, we're at 60%, which is the goal that the board has set for us in 125. So that's student enrollment, that's student success. Largest freshman class in the history of the university, pronounced growth. We're coming close to our goal for retention, and we have the highest graduation rate in the history of the university. There are few institutions in America that have that story. But there are also few institutions in America that are trying to tackle as many things at once as we are. So I thank you for your patience with me. I don't like to sit. I drink too many Diet Cokes to sit. I start to move a little bit. And with that, I'm going to pause for 1 second. Don't tell Pepsi. But these are things that are underway now and in the years to come. I want to take a moment to thank the people who are working in the trenches in IT, in HR, and finance to help us with the Voyager implementation. This is a major lift. I had the honor to talk to a primary care physician a couple of weeks ago who said to me, Dr. Noland, if you'd asked me in April about Epic, I would have probably thrown you out of my office. But now as we get a little farther on Epic, I'm starting to see the benefits of that transition. Epic is an ERP change that the Quillen College of Medicine made in their practice plans. Voyager is complicated, it's difficult. I recognize not everything is perfect, but I don't want to take away from the countless hours over a 3-year time period that staff in IT, HR, and finance have been engaged in. We're going to get this better, but it's not going to happen overnight. So I thank you for your patience. But as we look across all of these, from examining our academic portfolio to the strategic enrollment management plan to housing transformation, we will take to the board in the coming months some initial plans around housing, but at some point in 26, we'll take to them formal plan to build a new residence hall on campus. But let's drill down a little bit more. This is what you all did last year. This is what you did last year. At most institutions, if they tried to do 2 of these things, they would have broken under the strain. We did all of this in 1 year. We implemented a new strategic enrollment plan. We redesigned Gen Ed. We restructured the university. We adjusted the manner in which our financial aid portfolio is aligned. We launched a new budget model. We're implementing a new ERP. We changed the entire structure of our class and comp system. And then we invested more than $6 million in salary. We did that in 1 year. So we've had a chance to take a little bit of a breath. Boom, here's what's on the calendar for the year to come. I'm excited for the top bullet. All of those men who are sitting out of higher education, how do we bring them back? Degree completion initiatives. We've got a lot of work to do in the military and veterans affiliated space. Dan Bishop is leading an effort to ensure that we match and align with the American Council of Education standards so that those veterans who have served our country get credit for that service and expedite towards degree. We've got to look at non-credits, we've got to look at non-credit credentials, but we've got to build out also the work that we do with community colleges. That's a heavy lift, and I look forward to seeing the work that comes. We're going to do outstanding work in the Jordan Center. The high-intensive advising that's underway is going to build support structures for students who on paper look a lot like another group of students on paper that have 80% graduation rates, and that's our student athletes. Why do our student athletes experience the success that they do? Because they have customized concierge level advising, and that's what we're going to build out in the Jordan Center. We're going to expand our academic portfolio, engineering, hospitality and tourism, and others. We've got additional opportunities in the health sciences space, so there are programs that are listed that aren't here, listed in the work that we're going to do, but these are areas that we'll build out in the short term. And P20 is critical. If we're going to continue to meet the mission of this university, Dr. Foley's launched a new Principal Leadership Academy, making great progress in that space, working with Ballard to grow out the nursing pipeline. And then I'm not ready to altogether talk about the final bullet, but I'm excited about some of the preliminary discussions we're having to enhance what we do in outdoor education and to weave that into first-year studies. But I'm really excited about the work that's occurring in research, and I want to thank Dr. Hagemeyer for bringing this to the table, and that is to develop a comprehensive research plan for the university. You see the chairs in the charge, but much of this links to the work of our university strategic plan to be the preeminent R2 in the nation. We bring in a lot of research money at this university, but it's not all bench research. There's service activities, there are clinical activities. At the most recent board meeting, we heard about the Families First program that touches the lives of people all across this region. So research is more than bench activity. It's research and sponsored programs. And we're getting pretty close to a threshold. Our goal is to be the premier R2, but you can see we're getting pretty close to a threshold. So we look forward to having conversations with the committee as they move through the development of a strategic plan for research to talk about what research should entail at this institution, both short-term and long-term. I gave this chart at the most recent board meeting, and I want to pull it back up again because it shows the importance of the leadership of our board. In 2017, the Board of Trustees was created, and you can see where we were as a university. We had about 2,000 freshmen, 73% retention rate, but a 41% graduation rate. You see where we were in terms of great colleges to work for scores, but look at those reserves. The board has made it a priority for the university to prepare for a rainy day, and look at where we are now. Largest freshman class in history, highest graduation rate in history. That's a 14% increase. That is heavy lifting. That's our advisors. That's first-year experience. That's living learning communities in the residence halls. This is a full encompassing activity. This isn't just a number. But then you see what we've done in reserves, preparing for the day when things aren't as sunny as they are now. And hopefully that's not here, but we've got to prepare nonetheless. So now another hard shift. Usually when I stand here, I say we have the most beautiful public campus in the state of Tennessee. Now I'm going to say we've got the most beautiful construction site in the state of Tennessee. But there's significant work that's underway across this campus to transform the physical infrastructure. We're in a room that was provided and made possible by both the state, the city, as well as donors. Every time I step into this space, I'm reminded when I sat somewhere out there and heard Simple Gifts performed in a very small grand opening. And I leaned over and said to my wife, "This is spectacular." And she goes, "You're crying." I go, "I waited a long time for this." We waited a long time for this building, but we waited a long time for these other projects as well, from Gilbert to Brown to Burleson. Our campus is being transformed. Why is that important? Because you deserve world-class settings to teach and to conduct your research, and your students deserve world-class settings to learn and to be inspired. But they also deserve world-class settings in which to dream. I counted the parking spots on the right, they're 42. So to think, for generations, 42 parking spots got in the way of what we have now. But that University Commons has transformed the culture of the university, and I want to thank Jeremy Ross not only for his leadership, but for his vision. So much of what you're going to see in the slides that follow are because of the work of he and his team. But we know what's happened there, but it's more than just green space. It's learning spaces and tradition. There's outdoor classrooms, spaces for folks to gather, but there's also spaces that I think will be the scene of many a commencement picture in caps and gowns for years to come. This one I'm excited about. Every day I walk by this building and envision what's going to happen from a learning perspective once we open the doors. This is a transformative building in the heart of the university. A decade ago, there was a broken down university center. Now, this is a state-of-the-art classroom building that we'll cut the ribbon on in the spring. But there's more. Brown Hall. I can't begin to describe how important this is for all of our health sciences programs, but also how important it is from a general education perspective. Those labs, those biology labs, those chemistry labs were the same as they were in the 60s. Our students had better lab opportunities in their high schools than they had here. We have the largest college of nursing in the state, top-tier health sciences programs, but our labs were dated. That's not the case anymore. And you see in 27 and 28, we'll cut the ribbon on Brown Hall. But we're also getting ready to break ground on the Integrated Health Sciences building, which will allow us to grow programs at Quillen and PT and across the health sciences portfolio. But it's more than just here. Our campus is part of the community, and we welcome our community to campus. I'm excited by the elements that are moving into the Ash Street Courthouse, and I thank the city for their longstanding partnership with us. But the Tipton Gallery, our climate office, and then our Buck House, our student-led creative entity, are all in the old Ash Street Courthouse. And then we'll welcome the community to campus, not only for the Broadway series, but for things throughout the academic year. This is the mission of the university, campus and community intertwined. We've done a lot to focus on community-engaged learning. It was the QEP. And I want to thank Dr. Susan McCracken, and I want to thank Kimberly McCorkle and all who are involved in not only making service learning something we talk about, but making community-engaged learning something that we embody as a university. And that was reflected at the Elevates competition on Monday. Since we started Elevates, more than 23 partnership programs with community entities have been funded. And for those of you who were here, I don't know how the judges picked the winner. I think everyone that night had a program and an initiative that was transformative. But our students can compete with anyone in the world, and you saw that front and center at that Elevates pitch competition. But an area that I also want to note and to say thank you to are for donors across the region who support our university. In particular, I want to thank John King for the leadership that he's provided over the course of the past year and congratulate John on his new role as Executive Director of the Alumni Association. John helped prepare the institution for what's to come, and in the next couple of years, we'll move forward with a new capital campaign for the university. But you can see what has happened over the course of the past couple of years with philanthropic giving. But giving isn't just numbers. One of the things for me that is important to remember at a university is to stay focused on the long term. Sometimes issues and debates are so present in the current that we lose track of the why. And we lose track of the why and the long-term importance of the work that we do here. Each of us in our classrooms and our leadership opportunities plant seeds that we may never see come to life. But 25 years ago, a gentleman named Louis Gump and former President Paul Stanton sat down and talked about the dream of a leadership program. What would happen if we created a leadership program similar to the one that Mr. Gump was a part of when he was an undergraduate student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill? That program became the Roan Scholars Leadership Program. Here you see the first 4 recipients. Last night, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of this initiative. Think about the Roan Scholars that you know. There are physicians in this region who are Roan Scholars who are now providing care to our citizens. There are educators. There are more than 100 alum out making a difference. But now think about the students here. Close your eyes and think of student leaders. Think of student body presidents. Think of people engaged in the hurricane relief. Think of people who move this campus. I'm pretty sure you're going to see a Roan Scholar. So that investment from Louis to say our students are as good as any in the world, they deserve our support. Now we see 25 years later how that dream has come to life. And this is a dream that I'm really excited about. 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to be a part of a group that wrote a Gear Up grant for the state of Tennessee. And I could not be more proud of the group led by Dr. Ronnie Gross, who wrote a Gear Up application for East Tennessee State University. But I'm pleased to announce that we've received a $29 million Gear Up grant to continue to live the mission that was established by President Gilbreth, to get out into the rural communities of this region, Carter County, Hawkins County, Johnson, Kingsport, Sullivan, and Washington. More than 5,000 students a year will be impacted by this. When you include the match, this is $60 million that we're going to invest in rural schools in our region. For those of us who were part of a lecture last week where Dr. Wilsie Bishop talked about transformative moments in her career at the university, she talked about Kellogg. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Kellogg for education. What this will do is beyond description, and I can't thank Dr. Gross, Dr. Mims, and the leadership team enough for this. So as we move forward in our strategic plan, we talked about bringing P20 to life. This is the fuel that will make that happen. But the real people who make the work of the happen are here. This was our service luncheon the other day. These were individuals who've given more than 30 years of service to the institution. My wife and I have had the great honor to serve this institution for more than a decade. And as with any leadership journey, there are highs and lows. But across the consistency of all of that, what is the slope of this institution? Upward and onward. This is an institution that's on the move. This is an institution with balanced finances. This is an institution that's investing in new programs. And this is an institution that truly is the flagship for Appalachia. I thank everyone in this room for what you do for ETSU. I thank you for your patience on days that don't go well. And I thank you for your support for our students, because ultimately that's why we're here. 60% are Pell eligible, more than 40% are first generation. Each day you change the arc of history for our students, and Don and I are honored to be a part of this institutional family. Everyone have a great day. Thank you for all that you do for ETSU. Thank you for being a part of this Founders Day celebration. Godspeed to you, and go Bucks.